That's right. I'm in charge. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Anna Sabramowitz here, and I have a special guest with me today. His name is Mr. Jeffrey Dalto, and I am going to read his fabulous bio. There he is, sitting beside me, virtually. All right. You guys, I got all warmed up because I did a Facebook Live before this, so I'm looser than usual. So this is good. Okay. So Jeff is an instructional designer and the Senior Learning and Development Specialist at Convergence Training, and he's worked in training and learning and development for about 20 years, in safety and safety training for more than 10, is an OSHA Authorized Outreach Trainer for General Industry OSHA 10 and 30, which is very industry specific because I don't know what that means. He has completed a General Industry Safety and Health Specialist certificate from the University of Washington, Pacific Northwest OSHA Education Center, and is a member of the committee creating the upcoming ANSI Z490.2 National Standard on Online Environmental Health and Safety Training. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm excited to be here. Thanks a lot for asking me to do this. I'm always excited to get to talk to you.
Awesome. Good. I wouldn't have it any other way. All right. So I have a roster of questions. This one's going to be, I don't know how we're going to run this. Like, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, but I want it to be a conversation. And then I guess you're going to ask me questions after, and then we're just going to see who has the best set of answers. And then we'll have people vote.
I'm sure yours will be best.
All right. Flattery will get you everywhere. All right. Cool. So, our audience usually, I think it varies, but the audience is people who are either just getting into the instructional design realm or are people who have been in the learning world like forever, and now they're like pivoting, or they're taking the next level, or all of a sudden their company purchased an LMS system and they have to they're freaking out because now they have to, So that's kind of the people that we're talking to, I think. And if we haven't identified you, then please self-identify under one of the videos if we missed your demographic. So my first question to you then is, how did you get into the online learning profession? Your story, what drives you, and what gets you up in the morning?
All right. So like you, I believe, and like a lot of people, I think this is a common story. I'm a accidental instructional designer. As I've heard you say, not a lot of kids at 8 identify instructional design as a career goal. It's not right up there with firefighter or ballerina dancer. And most of them sound cool. So that's me as well. I graduated from college with an English literature degree. I had fiction and what was called critical theory back at the time, and philosophy studies. And so I think one could argue that I was low on the spectrum of employable skills. So I moved off to Seattle, Washington, and I had been working a series of manual labor jobs. I was working as a roofer. I worked in a fish packing place. I had similar jobs like that. I was stacking things at a printing press. And I got a temporary job at an educational producer, and they were making laser discs at the time, which kind of triangulates the time era, late 80s, early 90s, and they were science-based databases. So you could take a little barcode reader, scan a barcode, see what was probably a stunning image of a paramecium, and read a paragraph about parameciums. And but in addition to that, and by the way, I wasn't even working in the production department. I was answering the 1-800 sales number and doing mail for the sales department. And thank you to the salespeople, but I'm not born to be a salesperson. So I was in, and it was a 2-week job, and apparently I could answer the telephone number and mail things competently enough that it became permanent. Woo! Which was important at the time. I was noticing they were doing these laser disc things, which looked, it was pretty snazzy at the time. But there were also these people in the back corner who were doing something new. And they were doing this kind of weird, zany, skit-based problem-solving stuff where asking school kids to apply science knowledge after getting like an intro story and being asked by the lead character, can you help me solve this problem? Then they could interview other characters, work with a simulated science lab and science tools, look at additional resources, do some tests.
This is in the 80s.
This is in the late 80s or 90s. If you Google science sleuths or even bioethics forums, you'll see some math sleuths as well.
Yeah.
And so those people were pretty interesting, and I was kind of wondering if I could ever work with them. In my capacity as sales support, I walked into the copy room one day. I was wearing a t-shirt that said Sun Ra after one of my favorite 1960s avant-garde jazz artists. And the consultant who did all this zany problem-solving stuff walked in as well to the copy room, and he was also a Sun Ra fan. And so we struck up a conversation, and ultimately that got me out of sales and into production. And whatever that was, 1989, 1991, I've been working and learning and development ever since. So Mark Lutwack, the theater director, has been a big influence and mentor in my life ever since. His wife, Y. York, great playwright, go catch her stuff in Seattle. And then the education guy did it too, Sean Taylor, a science educator. And then I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of other really bright and helpful people in my career. So that's kind of the, what gets me going. I guess we'll talk about it a little bit more, but so why did I stay in this career? It's because it's kind of interesting. I didn't join it intentionally, as it wasn't a lifelong dream, but it's one of the things you fall in and you start to realize this is kind of fascinating how this, this all works. And then you realize you can actually, help people with some of their own goals. So the fact that it's a fascinating career and the fact that you're helping other people has been more than enough to keep me going over the days.
That's very cool. And I'm just thinking about the fact that what you wear matters. That's not the advice I'm going to give, but whatever. I think that's actually so cool that that one of the things that comes out from these conversations is that when you meet somebody who has that knowledge and they're open to sharing it and taking you under their wing, I feel like there's a lot of us just need that little bit of a break to just to get in there and have somebody support us, and the tough love, but also just an expert to guide you. That's cool.
Yeah, I really benefited from that, from Mark and his wife Y, and others who I worked with later. And I see this a lot now in through the internet with social media and the ability to watch people like yourself sharing information, watch someone like Dr. Will Tallheimer or Patty Shank or Kathy Moore, and which obviously wasn't available in 1989. But it's a cool new addition. And so I feel like I was fortunate then, and it feels like the opportunity to do that kind of stuff is even more present now.
It is easier, but I feel like because it is easier, it's not necessarily taken as seriously.
No, that could be.
Right? Yeah. And the other thing is, and I know this from just working with mentors that have mentored me, if you try to if you try to follow the mentorship of too many people, then it actually, you really should just do a deep dive and then get their stuff, immerse, and then move on almost until they stop feeding that need. So that's an interesting conversation. We should have that sometime. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I actually find I do that even now. You probably do this too. When I'm trying to research something, I'm kind of torn in a million different directions about the things I'd like to know more about. You probably are too. And I'll take a deep dive that'll last maybe 10, 20, 30 weeks, whatever it is. And then I'll have to move on to something else. But I do tend to focus on chunks of fun.
I think that's actually the upper edge, to be honest, because there's a lot of people who do that. They get in just enough to get, it's very shallow. It's very shallow. So I think that if anything, that's actually advice I would give to people, is the fact that deep dives are very useful, and specialization, at least in that moment, sticking through it and actually especially if you find somebody who resonates with you and just going through everything that they've ever published. If you love Dan Pink, don't stop at the first book, read all of them, right? So do that kind of thing. So what advice would you actually have for a novice instructional designer? The person who's really wants to make a difference, be proud of their work, because that's the number one question actually I get, other than subject matter expert stuff, is I want it, like, I know I can do better. I want to do better. And then on the stuff I'm putting out, I'm not proud of it all.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, just have faith in yourself and keep at it. And it's okay to have doubts about yourself, and it's okay to not be perfect yet. And, I would follow, again, same advice I gave earlier. Follow experts like yourself and people like Julie Dirksen and Kathy Moore, and get some books, go to some conferences, if you're making e-learning courses, go to places like I think it's called E-Learning Heroes from Articulate, where they have these opportunities for challenges or competitions you do every week. Any opportunity where you can practice and keep putting these skills and ideas to work, get constructive feedback on it. And then, just believe in yourself, don't get down on yourself, and know that over time you will in fact get better if you're getting good information from good people, following good models, working hard, practicing, getting feedback, and applying that feedback to make your work better. And it's a really fun career. I would recommend people do it, and don't get down on yourself if you're not the king of the world on Tuesday. Friday will come.
Because I think it's like anything, right? You are going to suck for a long time until you get better. And I think that the challenge is that you do look at finished products out there and you think, wow, who am I? But I think that happens in every single profession.
Yeah, we all suck. And like, we all have to get through that and get to a stage of sucking less, and none of us will ever be perfect. I speak at safety conferences, and I give presentations on safety training. And one of the first things I tell them is, like, no one's walking out of here a safety training expert today.
Please no.
And frankly, no safety training is going to be better. And by the way, what the presentation I'm giving you right now, which I have workshopped for years, is not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it a little better next time. So as long as you're doing your best and getting better every time, you're on path.
I think what you mentioned is also very important, that idea of feedback. I think that's something we crave, because especially when you put out learning and you are so far removed from the end user that your feedback comes back sometimes like 3 months later, maybe, right? Like, so it's upfront feedback is good too. Yeah.
I think I've told you, I recently read Anders Ericsson's book, Peak, which is about what's called deliberate practice for creating expertise. And for maybe just because it's in my mind, I feel like I see people writing about it constantly as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the things he identifies in deliberate practice is set a very specific goal, not just like when I play basketball or something. Generally my goal is get better, but I never do get better because I don't have any specific focus goals, like improve my shot by not bending my elbow, keeping my elbow straight and keeping my hand under. If I just did that for hours, I'd get a lot better than going out and playing 21 or some pickup ball.
Yeah.
But it's not fun. It's not as fun as playing pickup ball, so you don't do it. But if you set specific identifiable goals and then work hard at them for a long time, even if it's not fun, and then either monitor, this is a conversation you and I had in the past as well, monitor the consequences of your action, which is a form of feedback. Oh, I ended up missing all those shots anyway. Maybe it was my elbow. Or even better, I think this is a term I made up, but there's a improvement accelerator that can come from a third party, especially an expert third party observer who's giving you some form. And if you're getting that outside objective third party feedback on your performance, and if you put it to work and change what you're doing as a result, really improve over time, much more quickly than you would on your own. Or maybe you wouldn't really ever improve on your own. Like I'm still not in the end.
Is that a goal? Is that something we should be looking forward to?
Well, in college, I thought, well, I could play in the Italian leagues, but I'd be okay in Milan. But I never even made that.
I like that phrase you had, the improvement accelerator. That's really cool. And that idea, so you said it would be with expert oversight. And that's what everybody says, that if you are, let's say at some level, and you reach a plateau, and you've been there for a while, it might be that you simply cannot see or ask yourself the kinds of questions because you're not seeing things at the next level because you're not there. Like it's like your personal limit. So in order to get to the next piece, the 10x, you have to like get somebody who's there already, almost.
Right. Which is a challenge. Sometimes your SME doesn't always know what he or she does in order to become an expert. But hopefully, if the SME can kind of recognize what you're doing wrong, or how you can improve your performance, that SME can still be helpful.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think that everybody who is an expert is actually a good teacher, right? Sometimes they're just or a coach. That takes to be that person also takes some work to train that person to be a good coach, right?
Not to get too far off track, and I'll keep it short, but Vox has this really cool online series they put on Facebook, and like little 10-minute things about music. And one of the things, they had a little 10-minute video about what's called the Coltrane Genius, which is the Coltrane song Giant Steps. And it's incredibly fast and incredibly complicated. And Coltrane could do it, and he brought his band into the studio, and his pianist, who I believe was Tommy Flanagan, was supposed to improvise over this kind of stuff that Coltrane had been practicing on for years, and he had a unnatural ability to do it, probably because all sorts of complicated models in his head. And if you listen to the recording, it's got, once it's pointed out, it's almost comical, like how unable Tommy Flanagan to improvise over these chord changes because they're happening so fast. And I don't think, like, even though Coltrane could do it, I don't think he could have taught Flanagan how to do it. So there are times when maybe a SME, I suspect, taught that quite so easily. But other times, I think, where it's a little more accessible.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right. Now you said things like, you gave the advice for the novice instructional designer, and it really is about practice, reflection, setting goals, all those things, and also just realizing there's a journey there. It's not perfection from the very beginning. But what do you think are some fundamental knowledge and skills that somebody needs, an attitude that somebody needs to have to kind of get to the next level?
Yes, that's a good question as well. I'm going to kind of borrow from design thinking and say like a fundamental 100 level skill for instructional design. I think it's an important skill, increasingly important skill in the workplace, and be more so when we're working next to all these robots and we have to figure out like what value we bring, And so they have empathy robot. But so I would say empathy, and in terms of learning, I think that includes, first of all, trying to put yourself in the learner's shoe, talking in the learner's shoe, and figuring out when they need to learn something and when they don't. Because there's a lot of times, when you're being asked to create an e-learning course, and it's not even something anyone needs to learn. It's just like maybe someone needs to reorganize the work area or change the work process. Right? Or maybe just create a performance support tool to be just as good, as opposed to simply going in, the e-learning course mode. Let's schedule an instructor-led training. So I think that's fundamental. It's just like, when can I actually help you as an e-learning designer or instructional? And then, finding out basic things like how do people learn, which my favorite source, or at least one of my favorite sources, Julie Dirkson's book, Design for How People. Figuring out, once you know that how people learn, how can I help people learn based on that understanding? And then again, how can I assist people when learning's not required, but something else is? But I think that skill of empathy maybe isn't always natural and doesn't come up a lot in wonky discussions of technical skills for designers. Might be high enough.
That is so neat. I just, because I ran a live just before this, and one of the things that I do there is just kind of reflect on what I've learned, because it really is just me talking out loud as people ask me questions. So it's a good process of synthesis. But one of the things that came up in a different interview was, I said, I asked somebody the same question, and they said humbleness. And to me, both empathy and humbleness come from this area of no ego. And so when you enter into these relationships, I always say you're kind of you're not working, like it's not about you. It's about the learner, right? You're on their behalf. So it's kind of cool you said that empathy, because it really is that. It's understanding what somebody else's needs and perspectives are. Not, it's not your own, but you're thinking about. It's really,
and that's why I think you made a good point to connect it to humbleness. You're not just walking in with the silver bullet. You don't need. Yeah. So you're looking at other people's needs and trying to figure out how you can a good first.
Yeah. I don't know. Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know who Jordan Peterson is.
Oh, that's okay. He's one of the most famous Canadians right now. That's okay. I forgive you.
We do love our neighbors to the north.
It's cool. Anyways, so one of the things he says, and he's he's an intellectual and also wrote a great book, 12 Rules for Life. Awesome book. But he talked about the fact that even he like, the guy's like off the charts, super smart, right? But he says he walks into every single situation with saying, I can learn something from this person. And he's like, he's on the stratosphere of like IQ, and he thinks that way. Right? So we should all be just a little bit more empathetic and humble, because that's, we should be anyways. And I like that approach as well. That's, everybody has something to teach you, so you can learn something new from them.
Yeah. I thought you were the most famous Canadian. But Jordan Peterson, I wrote that down. Thanks for the tip. And I agree with that too. And I usually find every time I'm in an instructor-led training course that I definitely end up coming out with as much.
Yeah, those are actually the best. It's funny because when people resist in organizations they think that mentoring other people is a hassle. And I always think, you understand that this is almost, if not more, an opportunity for you to like up your game, because you learn so much through that mentorship process. Yeah. So I'm like, you don't get it. It's for you.
So I agree. And one of my interests is in organizational structure and how organizations set themselves up. And I'm like everybody, I think we'd be better off collapsing those hierarchies and also destroying silos. And I think you're exactly right. Yeah, it is great for a mentor to be able to work with a new hire and teach him or her all these things. But you get a lot out of it in return. And there's a big movement in safety, which we'll probably end up talking about here, that I have an interest in, called Human and Organizational Performance, or Safety Differently, or Safety 2, or New Safety. And one of the big things is recognizing that we tend to think of safety managers as like the boss with all the answers, and workers as the people who are just out there creating problems. And if we could just control those people until we can get a robot in there, everything would be better. But they're pointing out, like, it's actually the worker who is the expert. The safety manager should be learning from the worker, and so on. And so I agree with Jordan Peterson and a lot of others that you can always learn from the people you're working with.
Mm-hmm. So, and yeah, we definitely want to get into this, because I think that especially if you're thinking about a learning organization and you want to promote different types of learning, then mentorship and coaching is like a huge chunk of that, right? Just, I think it's weird because the trades, right? Like they're all about apprenticeship, right? And then for some reason, it's like there's been now this disconnect. And like you said, the employees are like the source of all the problems. And then like the silos it's deviated a lot because of, I think, the volume of people. You think?
Yeah. And I'm speaking a little over my head, but I think that Europe and Germany in particular has done better at keeping that apprenticeship model. And I know that sometimes I've been out to like South Carolina for business, and there's like a BMW plant, and they brought, well, it was new last 10 years, and they brought the apprenticeship model with them, and it's really helped, really been an improvement for their workforce.
You know what? That's so weird. I never actually thought about that, but I worked with Adidas, and they have, and they're like a retail shoe company, right? But they have like the whole idea of internship and apprenticeship is also like it's in their ethos, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What are your, okay, this, I threw this one in because I'm finding this word confidence really coming through lately as, okay, let me just frame this. So I talk to a lot of people who have amazing skills, amazing talent, and then they are still afraid or extremely thin-skinned to get feedback, and it just holds them back. Or they're like, they won't listen to me, or they're. And I think that what's happening in our industry is we focus so much on the development of the end product. We don't think about all the things that need to be in place in the individual to actually be a leader, do all those other things. So, okay, how do you build confidence as an individual, as a professional? What's your strategies?
So, and make sure I get back to the point you made about like actually putting out stuff, getting constructive feedback and changing. But like, and I think this is an issue for everybody. We all have the little demon of doubt sometimes, and at least for me, I can say that like as an accidental instructional designer, somebody who didn't have a degree and all that, certainly there have been my moments when I kind of doubted myself for that reason too, and it's kind of even held me back a little bit. But in terms of like my solutions, I am not above giving myself the little train that could talk every so often. But other than that, it's just the kind of things we've been talking about already. Learning from people, doing hard work, practice, setting goals, and monitoring your progress towards reaching those goals, reflection and self-evaluation. How am I doing? And then I'm a big fan of working out loud and networking, so you can learn from other people. Again, get that kind of feedback. Here's our segue. Great. And whether you're working out loud and working with people in your social media network to figure, kind of as a BS detector, or where can I get better or whatever, or if you do it internally, I think it's important to realize that, that feedback is intended to make you better. And maybe one way, and this is something from design thinking again, is if you come out with like kind of more of a small scale beta and test it, maybe you won't. I think I've heard you talk about this, and I'm taking this from Aaron Pradon, who is an L&D professional out in Australia. Maybe you won't be quite so emotionally invested and quite so hurt if somebody says it's not the Mona Lisa of e-learning development, and it's easier for you to modify at that point. But I just think in general you have to embrace failure. It's one of the greatest learning opportunities we have. Define failure any way you want along the spectrum, somewhere from less than perfect with the human condition. So we all live in that condition of less than perfect. We're all failing in some sense. We can all learn from that failure. And it's those failures and those lessons that are going to make us better and make our materials better. So I think we just have to realize it's part of the process, embrace it, even welcome it. And then, again, maybe if it's a smaller little beta, it'll make you feel better when somebody mentions something.
So you mentioned design thinking. Did you take a course, or how did you learn about design thinking? Because for me, it was all like, it's all over the place.
Yeah. So my intro was Aaron Pradon. And then through him, I started going to the Stanford D School. Yeah. So those have been my primary sources. And then I also, right up there with you, another one of my e-learning heroes is Connie Melamed, our instructional design heroes. And I've learned a deal from her as well. And in fact, I think both Aaron and Connie Melamed do conferences, but I've never been fortunate enough to see them. I would love to.
Yeah, I've only been able to see, it's actually pretty cool because Arun has a couple of workshops that he videotaped there on YouTube, which that's how I got my intro too. So one of my students, they're like, have you seen this stuff? It's awesome. And I was like, yes, it is awesome. He's got a very unique perspective, like, just looking at it's more big picture. He looks at things more big picture. And he was kind of like, I've been to design thinking stuff before, but I think he really contextualized for me the way that it's used in learning versus product dev,
Right. That kind of thing helps a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know if we talked about this or not, or if it was on our agenda, but I love that idea of like examples of how to put it into context. and that kind of thing, demonstration. We learn a lot from that, and that's really effective. And yeah, you can read something like design thinking, wonder how can I do this? How does this really relate? Sounds like a good idea, but what do I do? And then to have someone like Aaron kind of like put it into context for you helps a lot.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I found, maybe I'll mention this a little bit later, but I wanted to, because you're one of the few people I know that talks about lead measures and lag measures.
It talks about what, I'm sorry?
Lead measures and lag measures.
Oh, leading and lagging indicators is what we call
Yes, it. Yes. So
because of the safety, it's because of the safety aspect.
Which I think is something that, if we're designing from the world of design thinking for product development, we should be doing more of that. So I think we should be also borrowing from the safety world for instructional design for these things. Could you tell us, actually, if you don't mind, tell us a bit what are lead and lag indicators?
Sure, for those who don't know.
Which is a lot of us.
And I'm speaking especially kind of from my safety background right now. And terms are probably used more generally than that. So the simple way to look at it is lagging indicators are from the past and leading indicators are from the future. So lagging indicators count things that have already happened. So in safety, it might be something as simple as your number of days without an accident, or the number of they call them incidents that you have had. Yeah, things that you can't change. And there's supposedly a way to measure your performance. I'm sure like in marketing, they have lagging indicators for like how many people came to our website, how many people downloaded guides, and how many people bought something after, watching our Twitter thing, But there are things that happened in the past and are an attempt to measure your performance based on that. And then leading indicators, on the other hand, are things that are supposed to influence the future. And so, even a simple example is you have safety training as part of your safety efforts because you're trying to prevent some kind of accident. So that safety training, in theory, might be a leading indicator. Whether or not it's really a reliable leading indicator would be a different issue. But so there's a big movement in safety. Safety's always been obsessed with the lagging indicators, especially things like incident rates. And there's been a big movement in safety to move away from that and to try to incorporate more of an emphasis on leading indicators. And if someone's interested in that, the National Science Council's Campbell Library has a great white paper on it. It's not hard to find that kind of information. But in general, the idea is why don't we try to focus on the future, because the past already happened, at least as I experienced time. But there are also other criticisms of the use of lagging in the safety world, including focusing on incidents, and not to get too deep into the woods, because some of it's pretty interestingly philosophical. I could pull out some philosophy books that I hadn't, dusty since college to follow some of these new safety. But there are other criticisms about too much focus on lagging.
So it's almost like the idea that you have, when you're looking at a lag indicator, there's nothing you can do about it anymore. It's simply the end result. So it's like, hey, we did this stuff and here's what happened. And so
that's one of the initial criticisms. It's already happened. So you're not going to change it.
So a lead indicator would be something where you'd have, let's say okay, I know that if I look at my weight and I could say, oh, today I weigh, 150, right? 150 pounds. But I know that a lead indicator for losing more weight would be, let's say, if I walked every day for 30 minutes, that would probably improve my chances of getting a better lag indicator number at the end of the month.
Yeah, but that's a great, to put it into everyday language, that's a great example. Your goal is obviously to lose some lbs or weight. And so those leading indicators are the things that will help you reach that goal, right? And so, how many days this week did I take a walk? And how many days this week did I eat fewer than 2,000 calories? How many days this week did I not on chocolate brownies? Those are things that will affect it.
Yeah. Very cool.
As opposed to beating yourself up about 2 pounds.
Exactly, which I can't do anything about that. So all I can do is just somehow modify my behavior. Or see, this is to me where this would be kind of difficult, because I think that there's a lot of things that you can do that could be conceived as lead indicators. But if I say consistently, like, is that hard for you? Like, do you obviously need to work with subject matter experts and say, hey, if we do this for the next 30 days, just focus on that. Do you think that'll improve our outcome? Is that
Right.
kind of?
I think all forms of metrics and measurement, performance measurement, are kind of stuck with that. It's hard to know what's a meaningful measure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Nate Silver's book, The Signal and the Noise, is a good example of that. There's all sorts of noise out there, but you want to try to find the signal of something that's really going to happen, and it's not easy, and it takes some thought. And so we tend sometimes to measure, even if you're trying to create a leading indicator,
Yeah.
we tend to focus on things that are just noise, maybe because they're the measure. They're the
Yes.
measures that are most available to me. So, in e-learning, a classic example is course completions, right?
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But is it meaningful? Probably not. Is it going to lead to behavior change and improve performance, better efficiency, better employee engagement, retention, more innovation, more creativity? Probably none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easy to measure because my LMS tells me the answer.
Yes.
And so I can, we tend to focus on that kind of thing. So I think it's important to know, to try to measure for leading indicators at times, to try to find the correct metrics to try to focus on signal, not noise, but also to know that sometimes there's like a limit. Sometimes either the data we have can't give us the the answer we like, or just data. So data's great, use it, but use it wisely and don't think it has all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I understand that. Yeah. Culture and all those other things play a part too. Huge.
Yeah. There's a lot of like non-data forms of evidence in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. So this one, I'm interested to hear, because I've been involved in some apprenticeship type training and things like that. And it's weird because where my audience was just 18-year-old kids straight out of high school wanting to be electricians, right? So you're dealing with, what's your audience? Is it a full gamut or of people?
At my workplace, you mean?
Yeah.
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 So we have a number of customers who are often telling us, hey, we're bringing in all these young employees, oftentimes to replace aging baby boomers.
Yeah.
And so those people have a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge, but maybe don't always know the work process as well, obviously. And then we still have customers who have aging employees. I'm 52, my age or older. Some people who've been working at a mill or a plant or a factory for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking kind of intimately over email with one of our customers, a guy named David. I think he's 70, and he's been working for at least 40 years somewhere in Kentucky. And so, yeah, we have a full gamut of it.
Wow. So upskilling, reskilling.
All of that. Yeah. So like, again, you've got these college grads or young workers who are coming in, but really just need to understand in some cases, obviously, the process, but others they don't. A lot of times with the older workers, it's going to be an idea of upskilling, especially creating digital skills. And again, to go back to Aaron Pradon, I think increasingly an important thing to do as a company is not just going to be teaching me how to do skill X, Y, or Z at the workplace, but teaching me how to learn and relearn. And that's where I find him so valuable. Well, one of the ways. And I think that's going to be increasingly important in the workforce.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I 100% agree with you, because I've the anecdotal experience that I have with older professionals, especially in the trades industry, is some have this mindset that they've mastered it, and there's no, like, they don't like new things, they don't like new tech, and it's not the same quality.
I run into that. And
it's both, but
I see other people who bust that stereotype, but I've certainly run into that. Certainly at times, for sure.
Yeah, it's an advantage, right? I mean, really, as far as I'm concerned, that's like a Darwin Awards professional kind of elimination process.
Well, that's probably right, and especially as change is going to happen more and more frequently.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Speaking of adult learning, because this is the realm we're living in, what takes adult learning, do you think, to the next level, especially in your realm of safety training?
Yeah, so I thought about that a little bit. I had these questions in advance, and I tried to be clever, but I really couldn't be clever. Couldn't think of anything to say. So I thought, like, I'd start by talking about being engaging, but then I thought I'd also mention I'm not sure what engaging means really, and I think nobody's really sure what engaging means. And then it got worse because it's so general, and then it got worse because it became a buzzword, and so nobody even thinks about what engaging means, right? You just know it better be engaging.
Yeah. We want to make our stuff engaging, Jeff. What's up with that? Go for it. Turn on the button.
Yeah, as long as it's the E word. But, I think a lot of the stuff in safety training is true in all training. It should be relevant to somebody. It should fit their actual learning need. Just basic adult learning principles here. It should capture their interest in all sorts of ways. There are not a million. There's a relatively small number of evidence-based methods that improve training. One is something that you do great, storytelling. Like there are different ways to capture interest. Storytelling is any kind of active learning I'm a big fan of. I was thinking about this earlier. I'm a big fan of examples and demonstration. We talked about Aaron showing us an example of how to apply design to e-learn development. But I was just having the same conversation online with Patty Shank about how worked examples are so important early in learning and then kind of removing that scaffolding. Back to Anders Ericsson and this idea of deliberate practice, that idea of practice, hard work, and then again, seeing consequences and feedback. I think all that stuff is really important. But then I think in all kinds of learning, including in safety, I think you really have to, again, break down that top-bottom hierarchy, that idea that the manager tells and the worker listens, and change from a one-way discussion to a two-way discussion. In particular, in safety training, removing yourself from the kind of compliance focus. I know we all have to comply with what our safety regulators like OSHA tell us to do. You have to give certain training, and you have to create certain reports, and you have to put up your OSHA poster and submit your incident yearly online. But that can't be the focus of your program. And that's again where I'm really intrigued by these people who practice safety under different names, human and organizational performance, or HOP, safety differently, safety. One, they have this emphasis on having managers learn from employees or learning together as a team. They often talk about having learning. And two, they understand that there's a lot more learning that we can do other than just safety, and that the whole idea of safety as distinct from operation is wrong-headed and arbitrary. Safety is applied operation. And so, I think thinking of safety as distinct from operation leads to things like, I'm going to get up and lecture you with a PowerPoint, or I'm going to read you a regulation, none of which causes anybody to learn. So I think if you remember that safety, the context, safety, applied operation, and then maybe even reconsider your definition of safety. It's not the lack of incidents, but it's the increased potential for success under different conditions. Definition I'm stealing to the best of my ability, Eric Hallman. But so engagement, but also broadening engagement with all those different definitions of engagement, but broadening the perspective of safety training and think of it more in the context of learning, more in the context of learning from employees, and more as creating success. And I think that's a good way to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up how ambiguous engagement is, because I think that when I talk to clients and they say, "Oh yeah, our goal is engagement," I really have to unpack that. because I have no idea what they've looked at that they thought was engaging, and what engages you might be completely different than what engages me, right? And then it is that context and all those other awesome things that you mentioned.
But I do think there are workable tools to, fit in that vague bucket called engagement. And clearly, you use them. Storytelling, scenario based. You do a lot of that stuff, and there are other tools as well. Practice, feedback. But yeah, engagement. It sounds great. Who doesn't want to be engaged? But
and one thing that I always think about is the fact that like movies are engaging, but they don't. It's not like they produce any results, right? So it's almost like you have to step back and say how much of this edutainment is going to produce that outcome that I want. And actually, I don't know if you've probably checked out Will Thalheimer's performance focus smile sheets.
Yeah. I love that book.
It's fabulous. I think everybody should just read it 14 times. But one of the things that I really got what he said when he said, when you're launching programs, the only thing you can really measure is the effectiveness of that piece, and you're getting feedback on the learning piece, right? Not necessarily the impact. Although I think that if you do the follow-up right, you could actually say your measure could be, did you find that the resources that we shared in the module or in a workshop, that you actually are using the same resources effectively and are helpful on the job?
Yeah.
All those, you could, if you structured it. Now, one of the other things that I've been discussing, because I'm working with a company that's trying to implement an academy for all of their staff. So basically centralize all of the learning and all those things. One of the things we've been discussing is for employees to give star ratings on each course. And some people are like, that's great. And some people are scared as hell of this concept, because I don't think that I think that is a scary thing to know out there, get that blatant, this sucked, you got 1 star, your product sucks. And I don't know if we're doing that enough. I'm game. If they want to do that, I'm like, this is awesome, because the truth will come out. And even if something is amazing, but it has no context, it'll be so evident because you're obviously not sharing that clearly enough or you're targeting the wrong audience. There's so many awesome metrics that can come out of that. So using the employees to feedback, to say if they're using the things in the meaningful way, they're finding it worth their time. It's just gold. I'm like, let's not waste this opportunity.
That's a really interesting arena you open up there. Shout out to Dr. Will Thalheimer. He's got this new learning evaluation model called ELT that I recommend listeners go check out in the book on Smile Sheet. Both, he does a lot of great.
He does.
He brings up constantly, including in that book, though, in relation to the stars for this 2-star course or 5-star course, is a lot of people, including consumers of learning, cannot accurately judge if it was an effective learning event.
Yes.
So I might give that a 5-star. I might give that 5 stars because I thought it rocked, or because I thought it was engaging. Maybe it was, But did I learn anything, and did I apply it tomorrow or anytime in the future? That's and sometimes I think those are kind of reductive 1 to 5 gold star.
True.
Things could be misleading.
Yes.
But it's also scary because not only are you getting feedback, but it's public. There's a big thing with that now as well, where your people are supposed to submit their incident information, and the whole world can see it, and then everyone, and OSHA did it intentionally. Blame and shame strategy.
But it's an accountability thing too, right?
Yeah. The other thing, I'm so glad you brought up the kind of edutainment thing, because I talk about that in conferences a lot. We talk about is training supposed to be fun, and also when should you quit throwing in those interesting little tidbits? And I often talk about the fact that leave the interesting tidbits out, because I can go home and watch the Discovery Channel all I want,
Yeah.
And I'll get full of those tidbits. And I often talk about my dad, and I did this with my dad. I grew up watching wildlife shows with my dad on TV. My dad watched them all the time. They're full of all sorts of interesting tidbits. But My dad is not a professional biologist now, you know, that never enabled him to change his career. So, yeah.
But I bet you he did great on that Jeopardy category.
I'll check in. I'll let you know.
You know, it's actually pretty true. It's almost like, and the more I learn, the more I design, the more I realize that people are, we come in with a lens of trying to give people too much.
Mm-hmm.
And if we just got down to that 20% essentials, and we're okay with that, we're like, I didn't have to give them all the history, all the background, but here it is, and I'm okay with not giving them everything.
Yeah.
It's a better product. Those tidbits, I used to be like a fan. I'm like, did you know? Blah. Useless. To a novice, probably like, what the hell? Why did you do this to me? Now I have random fact.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like arguably engaging at a bar over a beer with tips.
Yes.
But you know, there's a time and a place for that. And maybe a workplace e-learning course is not that place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I agree. And you know what you said about the honesty or the accuracy of that self-assessment. Mm-hmm. I remember when I first started training, the lead lady would say, "Listen, I can skew those Smile Sheets results if I put out really good cookies at the end of the session."
I bet that's true. I've never thought about it.
It's true. No, it's true. It worked. It worked. Like people are like machines, conditioned. So if you're having a great lunch, you will have a better experience. Like that's why if a conference has shitty food, it's going to suffer in quality. The sessions are going to be worse quality perceived. It's kind of nuts, but it's that bad. So yes, it's almost like you're rating things, and are you truly aware of that? However, I do see a value if the experience is overwhelmingly negative. Then one of the things that might do is like if you are, let's say the perception is on the majority low. That would not only diminish that person's inclination to take another course with you because they're not impressed, but also probably make them not say nice things about it to others. Because when I had some interviews about why do you take up a learning course or anything, a lot of people say that it is word of mouth. Like if their peer said this was great. And so it's almost like you're trying to manage some sort of a PR piece there. On top of getting some kind of quantitative feedback happening, maybe, right? But so it's like there's a balance there.
And I think it's worth taking that quantitative, that's one with numbers, feedback. And like if you have an outlier and it's really low, investigating it.
Mm-hmm.
The right to call out would be great if we can get additional quantitative feedback, especially actionable and useful, which is what Talharm's book's all about.
Yeah. So good.
I think the whole discussion had about essentially a low-level learning metric, and we had it earlier too about like all these performance. Brings to mind a book that I know you like, and a guy, Daniel Kahneman, and this whole idea of thinking fast and slow, and we have two thinking systems, System 1 and System 2. Oh wow, that was
my dad.
That was not practiced, everybody.
Okay, and then I cue, and you bring up the book.
But you know, we can, like you're talking about conferences, like if the cookies are good, so it'll get a good ranking. And obviously that's System 1 substituting an easy answer. The cookies were good for a hard answer. Did I learn?
Yeah.
And in the same way with, you know, the whole signal and the noise thing, or like, was my learning effective? Well, System 1 is, I got people to complete this course.
Yes.
And the harder thing is, did it affect performance? So I think that's a constant struggle.
Yes.
No doubt one of the reasons Kahneman's arms reach away from you is constantly relevant.
Yes. And also one of the things that I really did learn is that actually speaking of Kahneman, he had that one study where, or maybe probably several, where people are very bad at judging the past, or if they made a wrong decision or they thought something, but then their mind was changed. Their mind fills the gaps in saying, yeah, that's what I believe. So one of the ways to overcome that is to have them, through intermittent points, actually capture their ideas and their thinking in that moment, so that when they reflect on it after, so it's almost like you could do a review, but let's say a review, but only in retrospect to other points, other captured feedback that's been done throughout the course.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end say, okay, so you've had all this kind of learning and feedback. What, now that you look at it all, what do you think? Instead of it being an end result.
Right. That increases your ability for reflection and metacognition, and to have it actually be accurate.
Yes, and say, oh, look, I actually think that would actually make people see that they've gained value, because if you start out the course believing one thing or something else, anyways, and then go back and say, oh, this has changed, that would actually prove to me that there's been value in this process.
I do this little like intro to safety training conference presentation that focuses on not the ANSI Z490.2.
Which sounds like a radio station. So I was like, what is this?
It does, especially when you say it's Z, I like that. But the existing Z490.1, which is just about EHS training in general. And,
Yeah.
I just try to teach them a couple simple things from that national standard. And one is, hey, have a learning objective. And I have them write learning objectives at 3 different times. And then we go through exercises and see examples and do some team writing. And then they keep rewriting it. And by the 3rd or 4th time, and part of what I'm trying to do is retrieval practice and space practice and interleaving. But by the end, they can compare their different versions of the same learning objective, like that they've written 3 or 4 times. I can't recall. And I think it does help to see, like, oh, I really made an appreciable change here. And they're not just at the end of the day saying, like, yeah, I think I got that learning objective thing down.
Or they're like, yeah, of course I could have written this by myself.
Right.
This is the first one. This would have been my first draft.
Exactly.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
Oh, I've got all day. As long as the worst thing that might happen is Bubbles the cat might show up.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually did an interview with Joanna, this copywriter, and she had like cats crisscrossing back. It was awesome. So what do you say to people who are still skeptical of online training, and they argue face-to-face is best because people are together, or that in some cases it's actually preferred by the learner?
Yeah, well, I'll try to tease that apart a couple of times, a couple different ways. I think there are cases where there are learners who prefer online or instructor-led as opposed to online, and there always will be.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes it'll be case by case, which is fine. I don't think anybody's ever trying to argue for using one training delivery method exclusively. And that's why people always talk about having a variety of learning experience and blending like that. So we'll always, I think, have people who always want to do instructor-led training instead of online or some other kind of technology-assisted learning. And in addition, there'll always be a time when Anna or Jeff would prefer instructor for this, online for that. But I guess to try to get down, and then the flip side of this is, a lot of times people will say, online sucks or something. But we've all been through all sorts of training of all sorts of delivery methods. That's one. Like, no one training delivery method has a monopoly on being bad. And it's easy enough to think of, I'm sure we can all think of a lot of different training experiences we've had that are instructor-led that were horrible. They were passive. It was a lecture, a PowerPoint up that did nothing more than lift some bullets, and maybe it was offensive to boot, and the person was rude. And these kind of things happen, or they like we're talking about, they just rambled on and gave me a million unimportant details or whatever. So nobody has monopoly on good training, no training delivery method, or on bad training. We could probably all think. My go-to would be to talk about Dr. Ruth Colvin Clark and her book, Evidence-Based Training Methods, where she makes that basic. There's no one method that's better than the other. What's important is what you're doing in the training, whether it's instructor-led or e-learning. So are you giving, feedback? Are you giving opportunities for practice? Are you using relevant visuals? Those kind of things. That's what's important, not the training. Dr. Will Thalheimer has a white paper on the exact same topic, like a meta survey, and he even shows that e-learning came out ahead as more effective. But he also asterisks that and says that's because these e-learning courses are being created by e-learning developers who understand effective feedback.
Yeah, better propensity for success there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I think there's at least a stereotype that older workers are maybe more resistant to online. And, maybe that's true, at least in some cases, but I also think sometimes it's overstated. And obviously it's going to change over time. But again, I'm 52 and I figured out how to use a computer. The American president, I think, is 70 and apparently even knows how to use a mobile phone. So I don't think these skills are quite as inaccessible for the older generation as sometimes we make it out to be. But I'm sure, there are some people who don't like it just because it's not what they grew up with, and that'll change over time. And I guess, these millennials will have to deal with something they didn't grow up with sometime in the future.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember when I was when I was teaching or designing the remote course for the apprenticeship electrical guys, everybody said that electricians don't learn online. Like that they're like a separate race of people that is unable to. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it just like, how can you lump people in these categories like that, right? And it's funny when you say, social media and the use of it. Stan Lee used Twitter till he died, and then
right.
And he's still using it, even though he's dead already for some reason.
I heard you say that. I had to check that out. That was weird.
It's weird. I don't like it. I don't like how there's continuance. Like his voice is gone. Let him be. And then this is the other thing, though. I find that we might be almost causing a disservice to millennials, Gen Z, is that it's like we're saying that they should just be so savvy, and it's almost like we're ignoring. There's gaps. Like I'll work with students at the university, and they don't know how to use the office tools. They don't know how to use collaboration tools. So it's almost like we're assuming that they don't need to be taught these things. They still do. I think the only difference is that they're just more public about their lives on social media, but the skill set to use the tools effectively and all those things, like we introduce Zoom sessions to like 50 students, they're all still going, where's the chat? So it's everybody's on the same, I think, level. It's just the resistance is the growth is different for different people.
Yeah, well, I think good point. I think in general, all these things we hear about how millennials are different or and universally different and as a block are mistaken. And a little off point, but I also have surveys and studies I've read show they often really value one-on-one instruction and mentorship. Sure, they grew up in a world where they had much more access to computers and mobile phones and everything. There's a certain expectation. But I would imagine every generation as they're moving into the workforce is not used to the tools of the workforce, even if they happen to be computer-based tools. And it would make sense that, I don't know how to use the Office collaborative software. And every time my company gets a new piece of software, I got to figure out where the button is too. Like I don't magically know where the chat button is. Or like, yeah, I mean, I know how to use Zoom now, which is why I'm talking to you, but I didn't know how to use Zoom the first time and I got nervous, So yeah, I think it's a good point that even if we have this sense that the millennials are all tech savants, they don't know everything there is to know about every software. It's hard to keep up with all this stuff. There's a lot of change. And again, that's why I think it's really important. 21st century job skill is learning how to learn and how to relearn constantly. Be a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I agree. And that is like, if you can just hone that, that's you are unstoppable.
Yeah.
You're forever relevant. So
Exactly.
So you've mentioned a bunch of resources already in books, but what's your favorite resource for personal learning?
Is personal learning meaning how I try to make myself better in my career? Is that what you mean by that?
Sure. Or how you're like, oh, this is a cool thing I want to pick up, do my spare time. How do you do?
Okay, so in my career, you know, it's books, and more importantly, the internet, because the internet's so easy, right? And there are all these people who share so much information on the internet, but yourself included, Kathy Moore, all the people I've already talked about today. I don't do as good a job about, so I go to all those people's blogs I just talked about, and you can go to the Convergence Training blog and you will find an endless list of links to all those all the people I learned from. I don't do as good a job as I could of like going to places like the e-learning guild or something. And maybe I should do that more, but I don't. I do get it. Obviously, I still like books. I even buy books that are not electronic. So I buy books made out of paper, and I still find that to be a great joy.
I do too. I do too.
Apparently, because I saw one right over there.
I love my Kindle. You know, I love the immediacy of it, but there's capturing notes, and it's different. It's different. I'll have sometimes books in both forms.
The Kindle has some great advantages because I can easily click on that word, get a definition, which I was never going to look up in a paper-based dictionary.
Yeah, you're right.
If I know the whole history of that person. So there are benefits to both. You know, and then I like conferences, and I learn at conferences. I don't get to go to as many as I wish I could, but that's a great opportunity. But yeah, I've learned a ton, like just from people like yourself. And I guess this is where like that idea of like working out loud comes in social network, who've been kind enough just to share endless amounts of information with me. And that's true in the training world. It's true in so all the safety people, all the training people I talked about. But in safety, people like Ron Gant, Todd Conklin, all sorts of safety experts in this kind of new field called HOP or Safety 2. Everyone's just been amazingly free with trying to teach others up. And I've benefited greatly from that. So, you know, if I started learning from Mark Lutwack and Y. York, I'm today with Anna Abramowitz and Todd
Conklin. Cool.
Then, you know, like, I guess my personal learning thing, I think, you know, I've been taking online lessons from Fender to play guitar.
That's awesome.
It's been fun. And it's, as an instructional designer, it's interesting to like evaluate what they're doing and check out its effectiveness. So that's been a lot of fun. And then I still need to get into an expert and start taking lessons and get some more focused criticism, you know, and feedback. But the Fender Online thing's been really a fun addition to my life lately.
Cool. Have you ever checked out any masterclass stuff?
I haven't. Is this the stuff like Malcolm Gladwell talking about storytelling and Werner Herzog talking about movie making?
Yes.
Have you been doing that?
Yes. Aaron Sorkin.
Wow.
Yeah. So cool.
I'd like to. And then, you know, I'd even like to take some of these courses from online places like any number of them. I can't remember the name of any of them, but, you know, learn skills for your job. I am looking also into just taking a online master from Boise State. Because again, I never got a degree in the field, so that's another way I was improving.
I actually have heard very good things about Boise State, to be honest with you. And I've heard about Boise State actually offering things online that people are taking in Europe because it's that good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks for validating my thought.
Yeah, there you go. And I think I think we're gonna get like a membership to masterclass. It's $250, unlimited courses. And listen, if you can cook and, you know, with like Gordon Ramsay and sing with Christina Aguilera, why not?
Why not?
But it's so funny that you said you're like, yes, I'm taking this course for my guitar, but I'm also looking at his course structure and evaluating it because you can't turn it off. I wonder if I could use this. I'm always doing that. I'm like, this is a good strategy. How do they do that?
Yeah.
That's part of the job, right? You just can't turn it off.
Right.
Okay, so what is the book that you initially dismissed, but then subtly just resonated later with you as you gained experience?
Yeah, I saw this question, because first of all, I'm really guilty of this kind of stuff, like just out of hand dismissing things. And that was more so when I was younger, and it was most of it was entirely focused around everything pop culture. So, because I was snobby. but I tried not to do that quite so much. I couldn't think of a book or something that I had dismissed, but I really struggled with and didn't bond with the safety experts I'm telling you about, the people who were writing about HOP, safety differently, and safety too. And in particular, I'd call out the guy who I think is arguably most active on LinkedIn, this guy named Ron Gant. And I followed him, and it was just counterintuitive. I mean, it is just counterintuitive. And like for example, your safety incident rate is not important. And I was like, that's counterintuitive. How could that be? So he intrigued me, but I didn't buy in for a long time. And I don't really recall that I bought in fully until I was lucky enough to see him at a conference. But over time, I've been quite persuaded and influenced by all these thinkers: Todd Conklin, Rod Gant, Sidney Decker, Eric Hallnagel, a guy named Carsten Busch. So maybe I never dismissed them, but they certainly had me scratching my head for a long time. And then it did grow to resonate over time.
So do you think that it just, is it repeated exposure, or do you think that was a part of it?
I'm nodding because it's a great question, not because I know the answer. I don't know. You put me on the spot there. It's a really good question. I'll try to have an answer for you next time, huh?
No problem. I think it is a part of that. For me, it is a repeated exposure, but also as it's kind of neat because it's like a little, like let's say you're faced with something, you get an idea, and it's totally not in your realm of consideration. But all of a sudden, in that prism, now you have this extra perspective, and you can maybe once in a while, glimpse it, and then maybe see more opportunities. I can remember how you said that you read that book, the one about by Erickson, I think.
Yeah, the peak performance book.
Yeah, and now you're seeing books all over the place and reviews about it, right? And it's probably because of that what is it called? There's a word for it. It's like
yeah. I don't know the word for it, but I know it's a known phenomenon, and I know I do it a lot. Like once I've noticed this one thing, I see it everywhere.
Right, you buy a red Jeep, and now you see all the So it's gonna come to 3 a.m. and be like, it's that thing. Yes. So so all of a sudden there's an idea that you've never seen before because you've never actually looked for it before.
Right.
And now you can see it. Anyways, that's really cool because I think that it takes guts to continue saying things that is not mainstream and just not give up.
Yeah. Well, I definitely have had that experience you were talking about where you just kind of, it's over there in the margins, and suddenly you get a little window into it, but not a complete understanding. And I think that's true with HOP and safety differently, and I know that experience in general. And off topic, but one of the things I love about talking with you, because we do this a lot, is there's always like a mutual leaning over and writing notes of other people's names in books, which you do and I do both. And again, this is a great learning experience for me. This is the kind of thing, like I'll have this conversation with you, and then I'll go out and get a book, and 6 months later I will have read that and integrated it with something that maybe Ron Gant said, and it's just a kind of endless, productive learning cycle.
That's awesome. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, so this one, I like hearing this one a lot. So what was the most impactful lesson that you've learned over your career?
I gave this some thought. I think it was shut up and listen and learn from other people. And maybe segues back into this empathy thing. I think I was pretty headstrong and self-convinced when I was young. Ironic, since I was in a field I knew nothing about. And there's a term for that too, the dunning whatever. But I think I had a lot of that confidence born of knowing nothing. And so I'd like to believe as I've gotten older, I've gotten better about that. I think parenting helped with that too. I became a stepdad when my daughters were 12, which is kind of like jumping in the deep end.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And you don't get 12 years of training. You're just the dad of teens.
Oh, that's harsh, man. Wow.
And very quickly, at least I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. So it was just really helpful just to ask the girls, like, what should I be doing here? So that process helped too.
Wow. It's kind of neat how you become more, it's like that whole Aristotle thing that the more I know, the less I know and understand, and I should be asking even more questions. It's just interesting how that happens over time. But
which again, great lesson for a learning developer, right? How can I help you, the learner?
Yeah.
How can I be more humble?
Totally. So if someone wants to get in touch with you or learn more about your work, where should they go? What should they do? What do you hear?
I write a blog where I talk about these kind of things at Convergence Training. I don't know if it's convergencetraining.com/blog or the other way, but there's a link in the top right.
And I'll put it underneath the video too.
Should I say again?
I'll put it underneath the video too.
Okay, thank you. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me on social media. And then I speak here and there at various conferences. And I love it when people reach out. So, where LinkedIn, the blog are probably the easiest places, probably LinkedIn, frankly.
Yeah.
But I love getting anything, like even if it's just my mom, I'll be excited. She probably writes most about my stuff.
That's it's actually given in our field for some reason, even though I find that even my mom has no idea what I do really. I mean, really what I do. She thinks that I work in front of the computer, has no clue what I'm doing.
But she's proud of you nonetheless, Anna.
She is proud of me. I know that. She tells me every day. Sends me a text message.